Come on a journey with a cinephile.
Wake up, sucker. We're thieves and we're bad guys. That's exactly what we are.
We was getting too big for our britches.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
What have you done to its eyes?
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Biddy well, little brother. Biddy well.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do this on episode 291. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So this episode here for you is actually going to be made for an interesting double feature here. So this is going to be at a Centennial Club episode. I know originally said it was going to be a Voyage to the Fives. I realized I went back to 1925 because I figured out a way to watch these two movies, and I will get into that a little bit later. But it's going to be Centennial Club number 20. So my two featured reviews here are going to be Frewaka. I think that might be how you say that one. This is a folk horror film that's getting its wide release here in 2025 that I watched on Shudder. And I'm pairing this up with a Soviet Union film. I technically believe it would be Lithuania if they weren't part of the Soviet Union at that time, but it's going to be The Bear's Wedding. So this makes for a folk horror double feature here that I'm doing. So then for mini reviews for you, I have a movie that was originally going to be my featured review of Dropped. I realized that wasn't horror, so I'm going to make that a mini review. And then I'm also going to be covering here my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is going to be Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf. I gave a watch to a film, Alice, that is also from, I think, like Czechoslovakia, somewhere around there. Take on Alice in Wonderland, and then I have Grafted as my 2025 rewatch, and then I have a documentary of growing up with I Spit on Your Grave, as well as a book review here of Uncanny Ireland. So I don't think there's anything else I'm going to do here for this intro, except saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming this journey with me. Let me get you over then to a quick break before I get into those mini reviews. I have a great thing here that I wanted to go ahead and give you an offer for since it fell into my lap and wanted to go ahead and share it with you. I have been given a promo code here for shimmerwoodbeverages.com. These are CBD infused seltzers that are award winning. They have been twice recognized by Forbes as the #1 CBD beverage in the United States and the best lower potency option out there. It blends full spectrum CBD with local Maine fruits and cocktail bitters for bold flavors, crafted without added sugars, caffeine, or artificial ingredients, which if you know me, that is something that I prefer because I get enough of the caffeine and I'm trying to get away from sugars. So it's designed for relaxation without intoxicating effects, perfect straight from the can or a refreshing cocktail or mocktail base, depending on what you're looking for there. This has unique flavors like raz lime, chai cherry, ginger orange, and just hemp. Now, Simmerwood offers a health-conscious alternative to sugary sodas or alcohol, made to provide a calm, clear focus for natural stress relief. Each can contains 5 milligrams of full-spectrum CBD for a balancing, calming effect. So this one here is at, like I said, shimmerwood.com, and my promo code here for you listeners is actually you get 30% off of if you use my code, and this is, like I said, a great deal if you can go ahead and you want to do that, and my code is going to be Cinephile1. So if you want to check out more of the information or check out their site, there will be links in the show notes for you to check that out there.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV, Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, out of this world.
So my first mini review here is one that I was originally going to do as a featured review, but it wasn't as horror as I thought it was going to be, but I still wanted to do this. It's going to be Drop from 2025. Directed by Christopher Landon. It was written between Gillian Jacobs and Chris Roach. This stars Megan Fahey, Brandon Sklenar, and Violet Bean. This is a whodunit drama mystery thriller film that is from a co-production of the United States and Ireland, currently sitting on a 6.1 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: a widowed mother's first date in years takes a terrifying turn when she's bombarded with anonymous, threatening messages on her phone during their upscale dinner, leaving her questioning who is behind them. So it's one I learned about when I went to the theater. What is interesting is that it isn't listed in horror, so I end up realizing that it's not in the genre either. It's much more of a Hitchcockian thriller. I was still going to include it in my end-of-year list because it is dark enough, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. I will reflect on it and I'll figure it out before the end of the year. So I want to start then is that this is a tense little thriller. As someone who met his wife on a dating app and gone on many first dates through those, I've been in Violet's shoes, at least to an extent. She's portrayed by Fahey. Not fully, since I'm a male, so it'd be more like Henry here, who's portrayed by Sklenar. Now, I will say that I've been on a good handful of bad first dates, none of them as bad as this one due to somebody being on their phone too much or having, more of the situation that they're going through here. But what is odd is that my wife, Jamie, did make me wait an extended time before we met. Clearly, it was worth the wait, and I was able to connect on that level. Now, that set up, the concept behind this is something that makes me pause. It would be annoying to have somebody who I don't know just drop messages into my phone, like through AirDrop. In this case, it's a made-up app called DigiDrop. The cautionary tale is to turn off locations to prevent that. Now, there's more to it here, though. There is a bigger plot. It would also wouldn't help because there is a masked man with a gun at her house. So if she doesn't kind of respond to these things, it could end up being disastrous. And that in this case could be her sister being killed, who's portrayed by Jen, portrayed by Bean. And then there's also her son, Toby, portrayed by Jacob Robinson. So whoever's behind these, whatever's going on, they have access to different parts of the restaurant. They're using video cameras, and it seems they have microphones. Also, a good touch is that Henry points out that whoever is doing this has to be close. The range he thinks is about 50 feet, and he takes out a measuring app on his phone, and it isolates it to the dining area as well as like the bar area because they're kind of connected. That means one of the people that Violet interacted with is probably behind it. I thought it was a good touch as it creates possible, suspects. That's where I'll go next. I know that we have Violet as she talks to the hostess, who is portrayed by Sarah McCormick. There is Cara, portrayed by Gabrielle Ryan. She's the bartender. There's Richard, who is Reed Diamond. He's on a blind first date. There's also Matt, who is, I believe, their waiter, portrayed by Jeffrey Self. And then Phil is another character that she has also talks to. He is the piano player, portrayed by Ed Weeks. So Matt is ruled out since she receives them while he's at the table, unless he has an accomplice. There's also this bearded man that she bumps into multiple times. He's portrayed by Ben Pelletier. There's also Connor, who is on his phone with a great scene when she receives one and he looks at her. Connor is portrayed by Travis Nelson. There's also other patrons of the restaurant. I will say this building suspense here was good. There were a few people that I originally thought couldn't be behind it for a variety of reasons. I will say that at the reveal, it made sense. This does well at swerving you for a good stretch, and it makes sense logically, so I'll give credit. Now, before moving away from the story, let me delve into a bigger plot here. Henry is a target. I will say that. He is a photographer who works for the mayor. What I like is that the deeper we get into this, the more it gets revealed. Henry could be a blackmailer that is just trying to be taken out. He could also be trying to expose corruption. There's also a possibility that it could be a rival to the mayor who's trying to target Henry for nefarious purposes. Regardless of the reason, which I will leave ambiguous, it does feel convenient that they're able to get into Violet's technology. It is a movie, so I can roll with it without, harping on it too much. Then I'll go over to the acting. The performances are good across the board. The best for me is Fahey. Putting myself in her shoes, I'd be stressed out as she is. There are different things that she must do, tries to manipulate those around her. I love the maternal instincts coming out to defend her family. There's also things that are done to build tension that I don't necessarily believe, but I can digress on that. Sklenar plays such a good guy, so that compliments her. My only issue is that I don't fully know if he would sit through her disappearing or not being attentive. Looking at dates that I've gone through, though, I guess I could see it because I've definitely sat through things I probably shouldn't have. Bean works as the sister. Diamond, Ryan, McCormick, Self, Weeks, Pelletier, Nelson, and the rest of the suspect were solid, and they all have different motives that would also make sense as to things that are kind of going on here, so, credit for that. Also, have to be filmmaking. I will say here is that this shines as the cinematography and the framing. The restaurant and what they do to bring it to life was good. It looks gorgeous. I like the camera movements and the odd angles. If I have a gripe, they go a bit overboard with us seeing the text that Violet gets. They have them on the walls or the windows. I like us being able to see it so we know what's going on. It just felt a little bit cheesy with what some of the things they did. Oh, not the rest of the effects were fine. This is more about the story, performances, and the tension. This does well in building this because I was anxious through most of it. The soundtrack also helped build the atmosphere as needed. In conclusion, this is one that I don't feel is a horror movie. It is definitely a Hitchcockian thriller. Thought this does well in setting the stage for our lead character. We then see her situation is exploited in this bigger plot. The acting was good across the board, especially from Fahey. This is well made with the cinematography, framing leading the way. If I have a gripe, the creative ways to show us text messages do get a bit cheesy. Thought this did well in the confines of what they're going for. Going for a bit darker would have worked for me, but I enjoy what we got regardless. So my rating here for Drop is going to be a 7 out of 10. Then up next is my rewatch here from 1985. That's going to be Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf. This is also got the original title of Sturba Werewolf Bitch as the subtitle. I had not heard that until actually checking it out this time around, but this was directed by Philip Mora. This was written by Robert Sarno and Gary Bradner, who also wrote the original novel. He kind of helped out with the screenplay. It doesn't sound like much of what he wrote was actually used, though. This stars Christopher Lee, Annie McEnroe, and Reb Brown. It also features the lovely Sybil Danning. This is a werewolf horror thriller film that is from the United States, and I think there's some other stuff here. Czechoslovakia and United Kingdom also were part of the co-productions as well. This is currently sitting on a 3.8 on IMDb and a 2.5 on Letterboxd or Synopsis. A man discovers that his sister was a werewolf and helps an investigator track down a gang of monsters through the United States and Eastern Europe. So this one I originally saw thanks to my cousin Jason. If you've seen this, then you know why he showed it to me. I should preface that he's 7 years older than I am. So the sequel I actually watched ahead of the original. Something interesting is that this is the only film, from what I read, that actually has continuity to the one prior. I recently picked up the Blu-ray, so I was excited to check this out as a Voyage to the Fives rewatch. So I'm going to start then is that this isn't a good movie. It's interesting, though, that our director here of Mora also directed The Beast Within. And, there's some exploitation and sleaze factor to that one. So it makes sense here. He also did Communion, which I will say I have not seen that one yet, but I prefer this to many bad movies because this wasn't the goal. Well, they worked with the writer of the novel, and from what I read, they took most of what he used, included, and got rid of it. This is just bad because it loses focus and does some things that takes it off the rail. I can expect that more, though, for, the attempt. Now that I set up, what's interesting here is that this feels like it's borrowing more from the novel of Dracula. At the time of writing this and then recording as well, I've read the original Howling. I enjoyed the movie better because I think they reworked some different things and it just kind of fit better for the medium of film, especially because the movie does more with the cult and actually has a cult, where the other one is more of just a town that's just weird. So I haven't got to read in the sequel yet. Now, getting back to my point here, Stefan, who's portrayed by Lee, is our Van Helsing. There's a scene where they go to the graveyard to deal with Karen, which feels like what happens to Lucy. They go to Transylvania, where Dracula's castle would be. Now, in this one, you can see that Sturba is almost like our Dracula. She is portrayed by Danning. Now, there's also ways to kill vampires that get referenced how to kill werewolves here. I do know there's some crossover a little bit with the mythology and the lore, especially with how superstitious the people of Romania are. There are just things that stuck with me and kind of struck me with this watch. So, I don't want you to think those references are negatives. It does just lose originality. I do like picking up where the last film left off. Even though you're replacing Dee Wallace, that's fine. She was going on to do bigger things by that point. I love the idea of Stefan being this occult investigator. We have this inquisitive journalist and a sheriff from Montana to join him. Now, Jenny is that reporter who worked with Karen. She's portrayed by McEnroe. And then Ben would be her brother, portrayed by Brown. That feels similar to Dracula as well. Now, going to this foreign land is good. What makes our characters into outsiders there, and then something I'll credit is that they were showcasing this wonderful architecture in this little town. It has gargoyles and skeletons. There's also a catacombs feel to Sturba's castle as well. Then sticking with these creatures, I love the lore that's being developed here. Having this be in Eastern Europe is something that I did remember from the source material. Actually, in the first book, they refer to a village that was supposed to be full of werewolves, and when some bad things start happening, they come to ask, or they make an ultimatum that they need to reveal who's doing the stuff, and it might be everybody. I'm not sure if there's more of that in the sequel novel, but it kind of feels in line with that idea. There are also shades of Elizabeth Bathory here, where Sturba does a ritual to become young. It isn't bathing in blood, but we do get some cool effects where this youth is stolen from this virgin. And using this idea of this original pack that Mariana is the leader here, and she is portrayed by Marcia Hunt. Now, she's the most dangerous one from the United States. That's something I can roll with. And having her come to Europe to mate with Vlad, who is portrayed by Judd Omen. that makes sense for the story. Also, a couple more things to include here. Stefan also reveals that silver bullets won't kill the original strain. It has to be titanium stakes. I'm okay with that idea. Now, I'm going to shift then to be filmmaking. Now, something to start here is the sensuality and eroticism. This is something I want to bring up with Mora being from Europe. There is like a sleaziness to this film. It kind of feels like it's influenced by like new wave eroticism and almost like trashy European old world vibe. I do love blurring the lines here where Sturba is bisexual. I get the idea that these animals kind of just give into carnal pleasure, even though, as we see through the orgy at the climax, it's happening more in the background as we focus on Sturba in the front. She does partake earlier, though, with Vlad and Mariana. Now, the cinematography and framing were good. Outside of the capture and the atmosphere and the location, they do hide the werewolf makeup well. It just is when they get zoomed out, they look more like monkeys, and that's probably partially budgetary. There's still charm going practical, and I'll end out this section by saying the soundtrack isn't great. I do have a soft spot for the theme song, also, which is the end credits probably contribute to that. Let's end out with acting. Lee is a professional. You can tell that his heart is in this project. I heard he only did this one because he had not been in a werewolf film yet, so he's still solid. McEnroe is fine as his journalist who's wanting to get to the bottom of everything that happened to her friend. Brown is over the top. He's so macho that it annoyed me. And then Hunt is attractive and just kind of looked the part for her role. I could see her being this dangerous creature. I love Danny in this role for her. I feel bad that she said she didn't want to do nudity, compromised at doing it once, and then she was exploited as they showed it 17 times throughout the film and end credits. Ullman works in his role along with the villagers, werewolves, and whatnot. I do love that we have so many characters that just kind of, they have looks to them that you just don't trust, which helps build tension. The problem is that they all just kind of wink at the camera, which kind of loses that effect. So in conclusion, this isn't a good movie. I have nostalgia for seeing it when I did. Watching it with a critical eye, I can see its faults and inconsistencies. I do think there's some still good things here. The acting is hit or miss. Lee's heart just isn't in this one. McEnroe, Hunt, and Danny are all solid. Brown and most everybody else kind of overacts. I can overlook the surrounding cast at the least. Going to Transylvania for the climax was good. I'm more forgiving of the practical effects. Cinematography and framing are positive. This is shellac. I need that to be said one last time, so it won't be for everybody. There is a bunch of nudity and more of like a party movie that doesn't make complete sense. So my rating here, The Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, is going to be a 5.5 out of 10. Then my next mini review here is going to be Alice. This goes by the original title of Neko Zi Alanka. This is from 1988, written and directed by Jan Spalkmeyer. I think might be how you say it. There's going to be a lot of that going through here, but this is also inspired by Lewis Carroll, who wrote the source material, of course. This is starring Christina Kohovotov and Camilla Power. This is a dark comedy, adventure, family fantasy take on Alice in Wonderland. I'll just go ahead and the synopsis is a surrealistic revision of Alice in Wonderland. But this is a co-production between Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and West Germany. Currently sitting on a 7.4 on IMDb and a 4.0 on Letterboxd. And I've already given the synopsis, so I'll just jump in here and say this is one I didn't know existed until it popped onto the Letterboxd top 250 horror films list that I'm working through. It ended up being the highest rated film that I hadn't seen yet, and I was able to stream this on Canopy, so I was intrigued knowing just the synopsis and the images that I saw ahead of this were quite creepy and everything like that. So where I'm going to end up start is that this is a feat. Spalkmeyer brings this to life using stop motion animation, which is impressive by itself. I'm a sucker for this, and so it's always going to help the score for me. Now we only have two actors here, and only one of them is credited on Letterboxd. On IMDb, they're both over there. Now, one of them is a voiceover done by Power, who is credited as Alice, and then it's actually Kohotova is actually the actress that we see. So Power does all the speaking for the creatures and narrates the events that we're seeing. There isn't much of the story, though. If you've seen the telling of it, then you know the plot points. This does cut out a lot, and my guess is just the amount of work that would go into bringing it to life this way. So, like I said, this is going to be a little bit shorter recap for that part, but there's a lot more that I want to kind of delve into, and I'll start with the visuals. So, this isn't listed on IMDb as horror unless you start looking at the more of like the subgenres. So, I was talking to a buddy of mine about this, and I'm not fully sure if this is horror, but I will say it's like watching a nightmare. That is fitting since the basis of the story in itself is a dream. We don't see Alice fall asleep in this one, but there's something great at the end of it that makes you wonder, was she asleep this whole time? And I like exploring this idea of the fragility of reality and perception. This can be a thin line which then brings in your mental state or the descent into madness. That was a good touch. I do like this version's take on the loss of innocence, as Alice is navigating this world that she doesn't fully understand, and that's kind of like an allegory for the outside world, as you can see him just as terrifying. Now, things I didn't even realize until settling down to write the actual review is that this could be considered body horror. There is literally here things that we like, normal things that change into monsters or creatures. There's also something else with that, as this is loosely like a coming of age story. You could see this as her body is soon changing as she goes through puberty. This is a terrifying thing, especially if you don't have somebody to talk to. We don't know if she does or not, because we do see her with a older woman, but we never see her face while she's reading a book and she kind of scolds Alice, so we know that she's watching over her. Then let's shift over to filmmaking. I've already said that I love the stop motion animation. The amount of work that goes to bring that to life is unreal. Now, seeing Alice navigate these surreal rooms is interesting. We then see her come to like a locked door and then find like a tiny key. The use of forced perspective to bring this to life is good. Everything they did here was practical, so credit to all of that. Cinematography and framing go, into hiding the seams. This is a bizarre interpretation of different characters, was a good touch there. This feels like Spunkmeyer used what he had around him, and there's charm to that. The sound design is also good to give a creepy vibe, helping consideration, for the genre. There's not much more to say about the acting. Kohotova is good as this girl who is moving through this world. She's young, so part of it's like her imagination. Powers' voice is great in keeping the story moving and helping us kind of make sense of the different things that we're seeing. All the credit into bringing the White Rabbit, Mad Hatter, Queen of Hearts, and the rest of the characters to life was no easy feat. This all makes it work, in an interesting way. I don't think there's anything else I want to say except this is watching a surreal, nightmarish take on Alice in Wonderland. Using stop motion to bring to life different variations of the characters that we know is great. Kotahova is good as this young girl navigating this world like ours while still being different. It makes you just kind of wonder what she is seeing in her imagination. I will say that the runtime is less than 90 minutes, but this is because it's more about the visuals, as it is a bit slow. I don't love this. It's extremely impressive with the final product, especially since this does sound like our director's first film. So my rating here for Alice is going to be a 7 out of 10. This is the one from 1988. Then my last main review here for a film is going to be a little bit brief because I've covered it recently on this podcast here and in this year. This is going to be Grafted. Let me go ahead and get this stuff figured out there. Okay, and this is from 2024, directed by Sasha Rainbow. Now there's a lot of writers here, so let me make sure I get everybody in line and get everybody correct here. So this is written by Lee Murray, Sasha Rainbow, Mia Maramara, and Howling Oi. Oh, something like that. And then this is starring Jess Hong, Allison Quigan, and Mark Mitchinson. This is a body horror, dark romance, psychological drama, thriller film that is from New Zealand. It is currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd or Synopsis. Being a bright but socially awkward exchange student takes her craving for popularity to horrifying heights. So this one I did on episode 277, which was Black Appreciation number 12. Doesn't necessarily fall in line with that. I did pair this up with Kuzo, which was directed by Flying Lotus, so that's partially the reason there. But this does actually double, since February is also Women Appreciation Month. That was kind of what I was working with for that. And actually then... So this one here is kind of an interesting blend of body horror mad scientist, and it's available on Shudder. It explores themes of fitting in, bullying, and the ambition to take things to the extreme. It centers around Wei, who is portrayed by, let me make sure I get this correct here, by Jo Yen Sun. Now, she's socially awkward and from China who arrives in New Zealand on a scholarship. She attempts to fit in with her popular crowd, which involves her cousin here of Angela, portrayed by Hong. She even resorts to a dangerous experiment based on her father's research. So we have some body horror elements, starting with the opening scene and then reappearing as Wei and her science teacher of Paul, who is portrayed by Jared Turner. Now, when they are working on this experiment, we get some practical and CGI effects there. Character study of Wei and Paul, as Wei is driven by desire to fit in and carries the burden of her father's failed experiment. Paul is a child prodigy turned professor, desperate to regain success, leading him to making unethical choices. We got some themes here of fading in, generational trauma, and the lengths people will go for success and acceptance. I would say that Soon and Turner are, they're good here as our lead performances. I would also say Jess Hung and Eden Hart they have some challenging roles here for something they kind of do with the body horror stuff later on. Cinematography and sound design enhance the effects. Some of the CGI blood is less convincing, but I can kind of roll with it. I would recommend this for fans of body horror and character-driven stories. It might be a little bit sensitive in the subgenre for some people and everything like that. There's some slight issues that I have with the pacing and a little bit of the narrative structure, but I enjoyed the story overall, and I gave this one, after both watches here, it solidified itself as a 7.5 out of 10. Probably not going to be a top-end contender for my end-of-year list, but could definitely be something on the back end there for sure. Then I have this documentary here of growing up with I Spit on Your Grave. This is from 2019. It was written and directed by Terry Zachary. And then this was featuring Camille Keaton, Mir Zachariah, and Gunter Kleeman. Now, this is a documentary about the film I Spit on Your Grave, and then kind of the lasting legacy, but this is from the United States, currently sitting on a 6.7 on IMDb, and a 3.2 on Letterboxd or Synopsis. For the first time ever, explore the myths behind the controversial film I Spit on Your Grave from 1978. So I was looking through the streaming services that I have while I was at work to find a documentary to watch late in the day. This one's featured on Screenbox, so I decided to give this... let me backtrack here. I've seen the divisive film this is about a couple of times. I was intrigued to see what this would offer. Something that was even more interesting is that the son of the original writer and director of Mir Zachariah, Terry, is the person who is behind this. And this documentary I watched, late in the day, like I normally do, treat it like a podcast episode. So we're getting here things that I look for with a documentary like this. We start off by learning the origins of the story. It is heartbreaking hearing Mir and his friends see a woman walk out of the woods after she's been assaulted. Police were then blaming her for what happened. This inspired Mir to write a screenplay about a woman in her situation, but decides to take the law into her own hands. It is from here that we learn about different steps of the pre-production, which included the hiring of Keaton, along with her co-star of Kleeman and Aaron Tabor. Now, the special effects supervisor of William Tasgall is also interviewed here. He comes into play during the production of the film. What I like, though, is that he talks about the different ways they brought some of the horrific elements of this movie to life. We also hear stories on set and difficulties of different sequences. I'm glad to hear that the cast got along. It just did sound a little bit traumatic for Keaton for obvious reasons. So the last section of this documentary is the issues that this ran into being seen by people, especially in the United States and United Kingdom. This then grows into the lasting legacy. What is interesting here is we hear from Siskel and Ebert, Joe Bob Briggs, and more modern film critics. There's also a personal touch here that we get to hear from Mir, Terry, his sister Tammy, and then some others. That adds a human touch for sure. So this was well made. It flows at a good pace. The edits of footage to help show things that were being said, including the effects. You could tell this isn't made with the biggest budget, but that's not really a slight, or it doesn't really affect it in the least bit, in my opinion. This is a doc about a cult classic that deals with heavy subject matter. It does bring humanity to it, though, which I appreciate for sure. So my rating here for Growing Up with I Spit on Your Grave is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. Then my last mini review is actually going to be for a book here of Uncanny Ireland, Otherworldly Tales of the Strange and Sublime. This was edited by Maria G. Kaiki. If I mispronounce your name, I do apologize. But so our synopsis here, this is actually getting published here in 2025. But the synopsis, like I was saying, delving into the haunting realm, readers will unearth 20 stories from the past 2 centuries. The stories range from accounts of weird folklore and rare imagined myths to classic ghost stories and modern spectral chillers from Sheridan Le Fanu, Elizabeth Bowen, W.B. Yeats, or Dorothy McArdle, and more. So I thought that recap from the press release did well, setting the stage for this book. I got the chance to read this when Valerie from Independent Publishers Group reached out to see if I'd be interested in reading for a review. So the other anthologies that she sent me over in the past have been intriguing reads and helped me to kind of expand out into authors that I might not have read before. It also helps me with reading ghost stories and other horror tales from other parts of the world that I might not have explored yet. So again, expanding my horizons. Since there's so many stories, I'm not going to break down each one. This is put into different sections that include folk tales and folk beliefs, myth and legends reimagined, some rural ghosts and uncanny sounds, gothic chills, strange and dangerous women, with the final being modern horrors. So some standout stories that I remembered here from would be The Evil Eye by Lady Jane Wilde, The Curse of the Fire and of the Shadows by William Butler Yeats, The Drowned Fisherman by Anna Maria Hall, The Fortune of Sir Robert Arde by Le Fanu, The Sea's Dead by Catherine Tynan, and Encounter by Night from Mary Frances McHugh. This gives a wide range of stories that truly showcase what Ireland offers, which is impressive, because none of these are necessarily like the other in different ways, but they might have similar kind of subject matter, or they might explore it in kind of similar ways, while also doing their own thing. So I will admit, I did struggle to connect with this book as, unlike some of the others. The older tales are written in a way where my mind would wander. That isn't to say they're bad. That's not the case. This just isn't necessarily for me. It's definitely an issue when you're trying to read that I have with older English, and it doesn't help that there's a slang or slight variation of that from Ireland. So even though it's not my favorite anthology that I've read in the past, I still enjoyed this. I'll credit here to Gia Kaiki who compiled the stories. I can't imagine how many she read through and the difficulty to decide which ones to include. Credit there once more. I would recommend this if you like Irish literature or are interested in reading ghost stories from this country, as it has such a rich history with superstitions and whatnot. So my rating here for Uncanny Ireland, Otherworldly Tales of the Strange and Sublime, is going to be a 6 out of 10. So that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Waras mir tosa. I'm ready, you must be here.
Look. Her primary care on Shaw May.
You're aware the patient has mental health issues, dementia, paranoia, delusions.
I wasn't actually told that.
Keith.
Tuarim dal lai dagatsa care this pianoso.
The Clotawa and Murphinos. Mom. I'm ready, you must be here. Walk to good Billy.
Kata green on our tain. Tossa, dodge the era.
And for my first featured review here, this first one is going to give me a second here to figure out how to fully pronounce this one correctly. It looks like it's Frewaka, but I actually don't think that's how you pronounce it because this is an Irish title. It is phonetically in the spelling of Irish language word of Frewaka, which we will come to find out later means roots, just so you're curious. So that's the only trivia I have here. But this one is from 2024, getting its wide release here in 2025 thanks to Shudder. Written and directed by Aslan Clark. This stars Brittany Noctane, Claire Monelly, and Alexandra Bizerhitskaya. I think it's might be how you say that one. But this is also featuring the likes here of Olga Werley, Grace Collender, Michael O'Glane, Osin O'Myolin, Tara Brocknock, Jim Cunningham, Pater Cox, Liv O'Donoghue, Dorothy Duffy, Charlotte Bradley, Claire Barrett, and Marcus Lamb. This is a horror film. It also kind of falls into folk horror as well. I mean, it does fall into that one, but this is from Ireland, currently sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb and a 3.4 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being. Following a student of nursing plaintive care who is plagued by trauma from her past that is disorienting effect on her present, her relationship, her career, and her ability to function. So this is one that I learned about when I saw that it hit Shudder. It went on a list of movies to check out for 2025 since it was doing its festival runs last year, like I was saying. Its wide releases this year. Also knowing that this was folk horror was something that piqued my interest, along with being from Ireland. Other than that, I came to this one as blind as possible with just knowing that little bit that I've given. So let's start with some featured notes here, and I'll start with our director here of Clark. She has helmed 4 films and 3 shorts. She has 2 released currently, this and The Devil's Doorway. All of her films that she's doing in the future as well are horror, or that she's been attached to. I've only ever seen this one, of course, but the other 2 that aren't released yet are Hellish Nell and Short, Sharp Shocks. So as a writer, she has 4 credits. It is here that she has 3 in horror. I've only ever seen this one again, and she also has wrote The Devil's Doorway and then Short, Sharp Shocks. Then moving to our cast, we'll start with Monelly. She has been in 4 movies and 11 shorts. First of her works that I've seen, only one she's done in genre. Nectane has been in 9 features and 5 shorts. First, again, that I've seen, only thing she's done in horror. Then last I'll look at here is Bustree Zakaya, and she has 6 motion pictures and 1 short. Like the others, I've only ever seen this one, and the only one that she has done in genre. Alright then, let's get into this movie here, and we start by seeing a goat in a grassy field. That is something I'll come back to later, and it actually is something we see, as a reoccurring theme throughout this. It then tells us we're in 1973. Pieg, portrayed by Collender, is marrying Diathy, portrayed by Lane. She's upset that these masked people, along with this goat we saw earlier, come to their reception. Now, she's mad because they weren't invited. He laughs it off, saying that no one ever invites them, they just kind of show up. She goes outside. Diathy looks for her, follows, and she's gone. It then shifts to present day. We see a woman moving around in her apartment, covering mirrors and taking her place by a noose. What is interesting here is we never actually see her face, but then we see she puts a sack over her head and hangs herself. Later, then we see this rope snap. Firefighters break in. From there, we see 2 women come in as well. The daughter of the deceased is Shu, portrayed by Monali, and then her fiance is Mila, portrayed by Bizatrazakaya. They're here to clean up the place. Mila thinks that it's good for closure for Shu. Also, Shu doesn't want to keep anything. She gets called away for a placement with an elderly woman who needs care. I get this is kind of one of those things where it's almost like doing a rotation and stuff, because she is going into, the healthcare field and whatnot. So she's getting placed with this woman to kind of help out. Now, Shu takes a bus to get there. It's a long journey that takes most of the day. When she arrives at her stop, she asks the driver for directions. He is played by Cox. He asks a passenger who sits up front, who speaks Irish Gaelic, that the house is cursed and she shouldn't. Now, they don't realize is that she can also speak this language, so they direct her to where to go past a fairy tree. Now, upon arriving, she finds the house is locked up and no one answers. She goes around to the side to find an overturned wheelchair. Pieg is now old and played by Noctiane. Now, she wants Shu to leave. She does come in, though, by breaking a window. Pieg opens up slowly to this woman, but the distrust runs deep. The older woman had an ordeal when she was younger, with her husband making a dangerous deal, and now Shu is more connected than either of these two realized, and which leads to more distrust and revelations in order to survive. So let's leave my recap and introduction of the characters. What I want to start is that this prevents an interesting folk horror tale from Ireland. I'm a sucker for this subgenre, so just knowing that coming in was enough to make sure that I didn't want to miss this one for my end of year. Now, I'll admit, most things that I see from Ireland tend to be using the creature of the changeling. I thought this one did some good things, going for it at first. There are elements here like the underground worlds, which is associated with that creature as well. This seems to be more about fairies, or how they can take people and what they can be done by humans to get their loved ones back. I do think it should be enough to get us started here. Where I want to start then would be that this film is a character study of our 2 leads. First, we meet Pieg on her wedding night, and then it comes back to her now that she's older. There's an interesting commentary that comes into play with her dementia and suffering from hallucinations. She was still a student and hasn't fully completed her education. She probably shouldn't have been assigned to this case. There are elements here that supernatural forces could be influencing. Pieg doesn't trust Shu. It takes time and things that she does to gain the trust. Now, the more that they spend together, the closer they get. Shu then starts to think that maybe Pieg is right and might be delusional. I love playing with perceptions of reality like this. We also are seeing it from the point of view of this unreliable narrator, which could actually end up being both of them the longer they are together, which is something to consider as well. Let's then shift over to the folklore. I'll start with Pieg is considered to have dementia that is resulting in these delusions. That stems from the fact that she believes she was taken as a young woman by fairies to the underworld where they live. Now, she had these horrific scars on her back. Pieg believes that without doing certain rituals and precautions, they can take her again. This causes her to distrust people, since they can take the form of loved ones or just people in general. Shu starts to believe, and she has a history here as her mother seemed to have similar issues. It makes her think that she might have been right all along. There's also this idea of mental illness running in the family now manifesting in her. Then let's shift over to something that I read up on this film, and I didn't realize that in Ireland, like most other places, I guess I should just assume, has history of cruel treatment towards women. You can see the disbelief of both Pieg and Shu as a representation. This small town has a couple of people who are just rude to outsiders. There's also this idea of traditional beliefs versus modern ones. This could be like Shu telling Pieg that what she's doing won't help. On the flip side, seeing that modern medicine might not explain everything. The last bit here, if the title of the film, is that it translates to roots, like I said earlier, which has a couple of meanings. There could be evil rooted in Ireland, or at least this evil is rooted here. Familial roots of trauma and the manifestation on the present as another one as well. Let's then go over to the acting, since that's what carries this. I thought that Noctiane and Monali are great as our leads. They come in from 2 different worlds, but they're both similar the more that we get to know each other. I love that Shu is also following in a similar footsteps, just slightly different as well. They play well off each other for sure. Biztrahitskaya has solid in her role. She is this lingering person for Shu who needs to decide to go back to her or to stay with this elderly woman who has nobody left. Colander and Lane set the stage well for this opening reception sequence. Other than that, the rest of the cast running this off for what was needed. They're here to kind of push our characters to where they end up. So all that's left then is going to be filmmaking. This does some good things with the framing and in turn the cinematography. It just gets under my skin when we're seeing things in the background and the characters don't. There's some interesting uses of mirrors here. Also include that the sound design was good. Hearing people's voices and not knowing if it's them or not is unnerving. This doesn't have much in the way of effects, but also doesn't need those. This is more about the atmosphere and building the tension through that, which I think it does well enough. So in conclusion, I thought this was a solid folk horror film. We are getting something a little bit different from Ireland, which is refreshing. Using fairies as our villain was good. This is interesting that we never actually see them. Presenting them instead through these two women, or presenting the idea that they think these people around them are fairies. One thought to have, dementia, and then the longer that she was with Peg, she starts to believe. The acting was good. Noctane and Monolly led the way, with the rest of the cast kind of pushing them to where they end up. This was well made. The framing, cinematography, and sound design leading the way there. The biggest gripe that I have is that it's a bit too much like similar films in this subgenre. It focuses more just on this duo, and where I think it falls short by fully not standing out to me. Still, this is one that I would recommend, as I enjoyed it. I'll try to get a rewatch in for the end of the year, just to kind of see where I stand with this for my end of the year list. So my rating after this viewing here, Frewaka, or however you might say that title, I thought this was, solid with a 7.5 out of 10. I'm also not going to do a spoiler section. I mean, it would just be me kind of delving in and just giving away plot points, which I don't necessarily think I will kind of gain anything extra by doing that. So let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review. For my second featured review is going to be The Bear's Wedding. This goes by the original title of Medveza Savaba. I think it might be how you say that. This is from 1925. So this is directed between Konstantin Eggert and Vladimir Garden. I just think Eggert might have done the opening prologue. So the writer of the screenplay is going to be Georgi Grebner. Maybe that's how you say that one. But then it looks like the novel was written by Prosper Maramy. And then Anatoly Lunacharsky did the play. So this stars Konstantin Eggert, Alexandra Kartsveva, and Yuri Svatogovsky. I'm probably just butchering these names, but here we go. We're going to do a bunch more. Natalia Rosanel, Vera Malinskaya, Boris Afoni, Alexander Goro, Olga Lenskaya, Varvara Alohinka, A.G. Vatskakov, Yelena Volkanskaya, Vladimir Vladisky, Valery Borkov, Nikolai Galdashikov, Karol Gurniak, Galina Kravchenko, M. Rosenstein, and Gublik Sherbatova. So this one here is a drama horror film. This one actually kind of goes into folk horror as well, so that kind of made for an interesting little double feature here on this episode. But this is from the Soviet Union, currently sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 3 to a 3.5 star movie over there, with the synopsis being: Lithuania, first half of the 19th century, while hunting on the outskirts of the ancient castle of Count Mikhail Shemet, portrayed by Eggert, a bear attacks the Countess, his wife. Now she loses her mind, and her son Casimir acquires a pathology. Kind of similar to her, I guess you could say there, but Casimir is also played by Eggert. So this film I originally tried to watch a few months ago, realizing I didn't have English subtitles for the text screens. It wasn't until I saw another review say how they watch this with an app on their phone to translate those text screens. I tried that, and it worked, so I decided to check this out. Here's a featured review, and, taking a step back here to make this another member of the Centennial Club for my podcast. So let's start with doing some featured notes, and with our director here, first is going to be Garden. Now, he has done this for 21 films in one short. First of his works that I've seen, this is the only foray he did into horror. Now, he co-directed this with Eggert. He did this twice, first that I've seen, only one he did in horror as well. Then to our writer of the script is Grebner. He wrote 16 movies and 3 shorts, first that I've seen, and once more, the only one he did in genre. Now, the writer of the original story is Maramy. Now, he has 58 adaptations to film and 9 shorts, first that I've seen. Technically, they're mostly off of his novel Carmen. So he has 3 works of this that are in horror, first that I've seen. They're all with the same source, it seems, though, in the genre here of Loki's, which I'll come to find out that actually is translation to bear. And I believe I know it's in one of the Nordic countries, or might even be Lithuanian. Should also say here, Maramy also wrote one of the episodes that I saw for the Devil's Game, like for Italian Horror Month. He did the Venus of Ill, and I actually think I come back to that later. So this was also made into a play, which we get credit here to Lunacharsky. He has 2 made into feature motion pictures, that is, and 2 shorts. First that I've seen, only one in genre. Now to our cast, first once again is going to be Eggert, who has 4 features and 1 short. I've seen him in 2 things. He was also in Alita. That's like the Queen of Mars one. So that one was horror adjacent to me. I know I covered it on the podcast. This is his only official one in genre per Letterboxd. I'll also look at F. Fonin. Now he has been in 2 films. First that I've seen, only one in genre. And then last will be Ayo Kohina. She has been in 2 movies. First that I've seen, once again. And then this is the only thing she has done in horror. So then, we start this with the synopsis. Mikhail is the local count who is married to Andalina, portrayed by Kartseva. She is fond of her younger cousin, Olgred Kastut. He is portrayed by Sevakowski. Now, this upsets her husband. While they're hunting, Olgred goes off and is knocked out. A bear then comes upon his body. Adalina finds them. Her horse gets spooked and she gets knocked unconscious. Now, she's taken home and given care. While she is out, her husband comes on to her. Now, she wakes up during this screaming about the bear. This then shifts to the future. Mikhail has passed away, so his son Casimir is now the Count. His mother has descended into madness, now portrayed by Alkohina. Now their castle has also fallen into disrepair. So Casimir is slated to marry Yolka. Now her older sister is Panna Maria Ivankanska, portrayed by Rosanel. And I actually realized I did not include here who is portraying Yolka, and that would be Malina Skokaya. That would be... So I want to make sure I give credit there. And I should say that Panna Maria is quite pious. She is seeing Jan Brendis, portrayed by Afonin, who is a local doctor. He's concerned with Casimir's mental state. He doesn't think it's a good idea that he marries Yolka, fearing for his life. Now, something I'll include here is living in this forest is supposed to be these spirits that are called Lokis, which I was saying is actually supposed to be bear, but it seems to be more like a supernatural thing in this area. One of them attacks a woman by the name of Tuska, portrayed by Lenskaya. Now, she's the local logger's daughter, so like a lumberjack. Now, the true identity isn't found about who attacked her, so they got away. They then find this moss that is referred to Loki's beard, and it's kind of a cool thing that we'll come back to later. So Bredis and the local pastor of Vintenbach, portrayed by Gero, seek out Casimir. The former warns him that it isn't a good idea to marry Yolka. He sees that what he is saying and agrees that it might not be the best idea, so he tries to break it off. When he goes to do with it, though, he's torn, and there's a moment where he breaks, showing signs of having this affliction that his mother does. There are concerns that he might not be the son of the Count as well. So that's really my recap and action of the characters. Something I want to go ahead and say with my preference in here is that this film only runs 67 minutes long. It was almost double that to watch this with my phone to translate due to the fact that I had to continue to pause it, given the app time to do it needed to. That did hurt the pacing a bit. That's not to say that I hated this, as I was quite intrigued. Now that out of the way, this is something interesting with the story here that we're getting. This is a period piece. When I went to start to watch this, I saw that this was supposed to be taking place in Lithuania, so that made me pause. It wasn't until thinking about it, that country would have been part of the Soviet Union at the time that this was made. So that's the country of the origin as well. So it also seemed like this might be based on local folklore in that area. There's also this novella that I was talking about with the Lokis that was written by Meremy. Oddly enough, I've seen one of his other ones with the Venus of Ill be adapted. Now this film was a play from that novella. Now, where I'm going to go ahead and shift would be that there's a lot going on under the surface here that I wasn't expecting, and that was interesting. We get the concept of self-fulfilling prophecies. There are rumors that Mikhail isn't the father of Kazimir. My guess there is that Olgred is, since Adelina was fond of him. The idea of her being attacked due to this bear, that Mikhail is also cursed there. They think he's doomed to descend into madness like Adelina. There's also Kazimier's fear, so he does listen, even if for short time, to Bredas. There's also mental illness running in the family. Adelina has gone crazy by the time her son is an adult. Maybe Kazimir isn't as... Maybe he's kind of going along the same path as well. That is where the self-fulfilling prophecy comes into play. There's so many of these little possible explanations to kind of look at different things, which I thought was kind of clever to do, especially this early. That's where I'll then go. We then jump into Kazimir being an adult. They state that the castle has fallen into disrepair. This could almost be like an allegory for his mother's sanity as well as his own deteriorating. If this place is falling apart, there could be something released with how it was made causing madness, like asbestos or something along those lines. I don't think it's that, just because that's something that came along much longer, but kind of in that vein. Another route to go here would be due to this bear attack, maybe Mikhail is cursed. There is folklore angle here with the Lokis that have tainted his mind. I could have misread this, but I do think he's the one who attacked Tuska early on in the woods, because he does see him with these like weird beard at different times. So maybe it's supposed to be something along the lines of like the duality of man. Now, something interesting as well that I connected is that this royal family somewhere in Europe that has, due to continued inbreeding, has caused their line to develop this extremely rare blood disorder. Made me wonder if this was something that was used here. Now, in 1925, it's a bit too early to fully know if it's something like this. There is also a correlation here to Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. That that has a family descended into madness as their house falls apart as well. So there are parallels. Let's then shift over to discuss filmmaking. There's uses of elements of gothic horror that I enjoyed. We also get the setting in this castle. It's dark and gloomy. There's elements of love and tragic, along with being unable to beat fate. There's classic themes in the subgenre, the cinematography and framing that we are fine for this era of filmmaking. They were limited due to the technology, but there isn't much in the way of effects. That was impressive, though, with the makeup. They were able to make Mikhail and Kazimir look like two different actors. Alka was good as this crazy older Adelina, and I thought how they made her look was spot on. There's also this Romani woman that we see. Also, I thought here was a real bear, but I'm actually now seeing that this is probably an actor inside of a costume, and that was Nikolay Trumfomova. So I want to give credit to being able to look as well as he did. Then what was truly impressive here were the musical selections and the sound effects that were synced with this version that I saw. I'm not sure if that was originally intended, but it helped my viewing for sure. So all that's left then would be the acting performance. I thought that Eggert was good as both Mikhail and the son Kazimir. Now, the former was just brooding, thinking his wife has an affair. He shows solid range for the latter, though. His mental state is always in question, which works. Kartsveva and Savadowski set the stage well for this prologue. Afonin, Melanskokaya, Garo, and the rest of the cast kind of were good to push Kazimir to where things ended up with the story. It was a bit over the top, but it had to be for the silent era, so I'm not going to hold that as a major issue here. So I didn't find any trivia or anything like that, so in conclusion, this is a film that was going on with more than you'd expect for something this early into cinema. There's more subtext that I read online about this potentially being subversive toward the aristocrats, or the aristocracy, I think that might be how you actually say that. What they do with the on-screen is interesting with self-fulfilling prophecies and descending into madness. Is there a curse here, or is it just in the head of Kashmir? Now, the acting was good for the era. This was well made with the cinematography, framing, and the editing to work in its favor. This version I watched with the soundtrack was good to enhance it for my viewing. Now one that I can recommend to everybody, unless you kind of want to see the history of horror cinema or an early Soviet filmmaking. I'd recommend this one for the people that are trying to do a little bit deeper dive. So my rating here for The Bear's Wedding is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. So that's all I have here. I'm not going to go into a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think I need to delve into anything deeper there. So let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out this show. And I have a great offer here that I wanted to go ahead and extend to all you listeners out there for oldglory.com. This is a place where you can get over 300,000 items for music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture fans, featuring officially licensed merch from iconic bands and top sports teams. Discover your perfect fan gear and save with my exclusive discount. And that is going to be Cinephile 1. But here you get a 15% discount off of any product, and this is exclusive for something that I'm doing and for what has been offered to me. And I mean, this has things like artists here, Bob Marley, the Beatles, Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones, Metallica, and more. We also have sports fans have stuff here for your favorite teams with official gear from the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA, showcasing your team pride in style. And they even have some stuff here that celebrate, entertainment, TV shows, movies, lifestyle brands, and it means some quirky gifts to fan favorite apparel. There's something for everybody. With free standard shipping and same-day order processing, Old Glory delivers fast and reliable service with every purchase. Whether shopping for yourself or looking for a perfect gift, Old Glory is your one-stop shop for iconic, high-quality merch that reflects your love for music and sports, as well as like pop culture. And I mean, kind of just running through some of this stuff. This is a family-owned superstore since 1969. They're known for their quality and customer service. You can get exclusive selection of graphic tees, hoodies, hats, and accessories. Represent your favorite sports team with official fan gear. Discover quirky gifts, like I was saying, and fun pop culture apparel. Perfect place to shop for, this type of stuff. And there's a vast selection of entertainment-themed products, including movies and TV shows if you're not necessarily into some of the other things. And enjoy reliable and fast service with Old Glory's commitment to customer satisfaction, the ultimate source for high-quality, licensed fan merchandise for all ages. Like I said, my promo code is going to be Cinephile1, all one word. So if you're kind of interested, go ahead and check out their website here in my show notes, as I'll have I actually have more details down there for you as well.
You know what that sound means? It's another episode of Game for a Movie, where we ask, are you game for a movie?
Tell me, Andre.
There's no special features on that goddamn DVD, alright?
Oh, wow.
For Hansel and Gretel?
Hansel and Gretel.
You have a DVD
You watch it?
of
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel.
She basically has sex with it, somehow.
No,
Foreplay.
Yeah. Yes.
She's chair foreplay.
They knocked it out of the park, which is why it's my number 3. So.
Oh! Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't be in it because this movie doesn't have women. But, it's
You-
fine.
It has
You're right.
It has one.
You would have 3 lines of dialogue.
No, she has more than 3.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually gonna get, I earn my 4 sentences of dialogue rather than, here, have a paycheck. You just stood there on the screen. You're a sexy lamp.
Anyway, we're not.
Dark Phoenix 2.
No.
No.
Because they really hate each other, so we get to enjoy some wonderful comedic scenes of them hating each other so much that they get into physical altercations that include her biting ex-detective Phillips's dick.
Okay.
But we don't. Okay. In a hot tub.
I know all of those words were English, but the way you constructed them, I'm lost.
I'm not following the arrangement of them very well. For those who haven't rated us or liked or given us a review, don't say that we haven't given you anything of value after listening to this podcast. You now know the difference between an R-rated dick and an NC-17 X-rated dick. You're welcome.
Thank you guys for listening to Game for a Movie, where we ask, are you game for a movie? We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
And welcome back one last time here, and just to kind of go through my social medias and stuff, if you'd like to send me an email, you can send that at journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. You can send me any sort of feedback, or if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and shoot them there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Or if you want to send me any screener links or anything like that, anything podcast related, you can send it via that way. If you'd like to read any of the written reviews, I'll direct you to Reviews of the Dead, and that's horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to become friends with me on Facebook, I'm David Michigan Garrett Jr. On Twitter, I'm Buckeye from Mish. Letterboxd, I'm David OSU. On Instagram, I'm DavidOSU87. On Threads, I'm DavidOSU87. And then Journey with a Cinephile has its own Instagram at Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. Now, all of these ones I will be sharing like my ratings on, whatnot. I know for Letterboxd, all of the reviews are going to be for horror and non-horror alike. Instagram, I will be sharing over there is my different like posters and everything for things that I'm reviewing. My personal account, you might see some personal pictures every now and then if I can remember to take them. And then, kind of same thing for Threads. And then Journey with a Cinephile is going to be more of just kind of posting podcast-related different stuff over there. And I'll also direct you to the Nightclub Discord channel, as I have a little section over there where we have some good conversations. I post all of my reviews and any new podcast episodes or some of the things I'm watching when I actually have time to post that. So keep an eye out over there, and I'll have the link for that and everything else in the show notes there. And then I'm also going to direct you, a way that you can actually listen to the show is going to be through the Pod Nation TV. This is a streaming service and everything like that. There will be a link in the blog posts for all of my episodes, so if you'd like to listen to it that way, it's kind of a cool little thing. You can definitely do that through like Roku TV, and there's some other apps for it as well, just as another way for you to consume this podcast if you decide to. And there's also a lot of other great shows that are on that network as well. And then for my next episode, it's going to be 292. This is going to be another of my Centennial Club episodes for the same reason that I watched The Bear's Wedding on this one. And the first featured review is going to end up being the case of the murder of Terrell Mekavalavadze. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to pronounce that one better there. I haven't figured out a 2025 watch as of yet. I do believe it might end up being The Surrender. I'm going to double check to see if there's anything else that is streaming that I didn't realize was available on VOD or anything like that. But I will have, a double feature there. And then my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is going to be Godzilla 1985. I haven't watched this one for, a good handful of years, so I'll check that out. And then I Heart Willie is going to be the 2025 rewatch that I do for this week, and then I'll have more mini reviews for you as I kind of watch things. Don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this outro except saying that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending